Good morning. It's September 4th, and this is To My Liberal Friends. Well, today is Labor Day, and it's a day that's been set aside to honor the working men and women of this nation. And I'm talking about those that work with their hands and do the things that we need done. In many cases, they're not appreciated. Some years ago, a country group, Alabama, had a song that was entitled 4-Hour Week for a Living. It was to celebrate the working man. The first verse went like this. There are people in this country who work hard every day, not for fame or fortune do they strive, but the fruits of their labor are worth more than their pay, and it's time a few of them were recognized. Well, I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood, East Carnegie, just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I lived a block and a half from Union Electric Steel, and this was a plant that made rollers for the other steel mills to roll the ingots they produced. I did go to college, but those blue-collar roots never left me. I spent every summer working in the steel mills of Pittsburgh doing various jobs. My first summer I worked in the labor gang at Union Electric so I could just walk to work. My second summer I worked at J&L Steel on the south side of Pittsburgh. I was in the labor gang for the half of the summer and worked on the open hearth furnaces. The second half I was sent across the Monongahela River and worked in the coking ovens. I was a benchman and a lid man, which is on top of the ovens. You wore wooden clogs over your shoes because of the heat. My final summer, I worked on the coking ovens at U.S. Steel in Clairton. Well, yesterday I watched a television show on CBS Sunday Morning. They were talking about the divides in our country, and one of those was the divide between college attenders and those who chose to learn trade. It was an interesting segment. The first person interviewed was an African-American master plumber. He was also the key instructor in a school to teach young men and women how to become plumbers. He talked about the attitude of college-educated people toward those in the trades and said they look down on us, but when they have a problem, they're on the phone to us. He made the point that learning to be a plumber takes 5 years to become a licensed plumber, and then 2 other points. You get paid while you're learning, and you don't have any student debt. Ted Koppel, the interviewer, then asked a political question. He said in the past the Democratic Party was the Union Party. This plumber laughed. He said, quote, trusting a politician will only break your heart, end quote. Koppel asked if he would mind saying how much he made. The plumber smiled and said, well, north of $100,000. Koppel then said to the viewers it was much more than $100,000. The plumber admitted that he not only owned a home, but in fact he owned 2 homes. They interviewed another plumber, and when asked about the union being all for Democrats, he laughed as well. He said, we hear from that from union bosses, but out here in the field, we're a lot more conservative, and they don't get it. This CBS show was talking about divides in our nation and made the point that we have been divided historically over and over. But the divide that seems to be occurring politically in our nation today is one over the long term. It's not healthy. One of the segments of the show was the effort by the rural voters in eastern Oregon to leave Oregon and become part of Idaho. They're tired of being dominated by the more populous part of Oregon that surrounds Portland. The person being interviewed said that he spoke to a state legislator from Portland and said, quote, you guys just don't hear us. The reply he got was very informative. The legislator said, we hear you, we just outvote you. That comment summed up the major political divide that exists in our country today. We have Democrats living in the large urban areas, and they tend to become more and more liberal. They depend on the government for much of their safety net. In the suburban and rural areas, they tend to be more conservative and view government as something that's needed, but should be more limited and not encroach on them. This divide is further heightened by the attitude of the college-educated office worker who looks down on those that get their hands dirty doing the work that needs to be done, but is beneath them. It reminded me of a few paragraphs from Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation. He was talking about Ben Bradlee, the former managing editor of the Washington Post. Bradlee told him that when he graduated from Harvard during World War II, the military immediately put him in the intelligence service because he was too smart to be wasted in an infantry position. It was a simple comment, but one that permeates through our society, that some of us that went to college are somehow better than those that did not. And this is the attitude that so many of our college-educated people have. I'm too good to do that type of job. And yet how many of them are now hoping, no demanding, that the taxpayers pay the money they borrowed to attend college? They have the chutzpah to ask the kids they laughed at to help pay for their foolishness. Well, getting back to Labor Day, as a kid, this was a huge union holiday. Pittsburgh was a union town. And being honest, the unions did a great deal for the working man. They were the champions of fair wages and better working conditions. They got health benefits for their workers. But somewhere along the way, they quit thinking about the workers they represented and focused on politics. They, the union leadership, became one of the primary funders of Democratic political campaigns. They quit listening to the workers they represented, who were not all enthralled with the political and social causes the leadership and the Democratic allies were pushing. Unions have been losing touch with their members because they're out of touch with their. And today, the largest number of unionized workers are government employees. The American Federation of Teachers has more than 1.6 million members and collects millions upon millions in dues. But the teachers themselves are not as liberal as their leadership. The AFT diverts large sums of money supporting left-wing politicians and causes without regard for the political diversity of their own members. And those leaders are handsomely paid. Randy Weingarten, the head of AFT, is paid close to $500,000, which is 8 times more than the average teacher earns. And it's even worse in their sister union, the National Education Association, where they spent almost $50 million in political activities in 2021 and 22. And this has become typical of unions today. And as the workers in the CBS show said, the workers themselves can be much more conservative than the leadership, but the leadership doesn't give a damn about what the worker thinks. Teachers union should be focused on education and not divisive political campaigns. But they're all in promoting the liberal agenda, and that is not the unions I saw while growing up. And that's part of the political divide we have in this country. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.